Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the SOMM TV podcast. My name is Jason Wise. On today's podcast, we have a very special conversation. We are going to be speaking with Adrian Rodriguez of Joss Wines, a French winemaker living in the United States who makes wines in the ancient country of Georgia. Georgia is one of the most fascinating places that has an argument to be the originator of all the grapes we use to make wine. So in this conversation, we're going to talk about that incredible history and the culture of winemaking in Georgia. Before we do that, I want to talk to you all and say Cup of Salvation, the newest SOMM film, has released in Los Angeles, and the response has been staggering. This is the biggest, most important film we've ever made. I cannot believe the audience reactions. We've been extended another week in Los Angeles, so make sure you get tickets for that. There are Q&As with the director, myself, and the cast tonight and tomorrow, and all next week. It will be playing in Los Angeles. Go to sommfilms.com to get tickets. We're opening in Chicago at the Music Box Theater the 14th and 15th. Do not sleep on those. Tickets are going fast. And then Napa the 20th, 21st, and 22nd at the Cameo Cinema. And then Atlanta November 1st. Sommfilms.com has a full list of screenings, and we're adding more every day. Most tickets come with a glass of wine for any of these screenings. Many have also been asking how to get the wines in our upcoming SOMM film, Cup of Salvation. You can get those at storicawines.com. STORICA, storicawines.com. There is a wine in this film that none of you will believe, and you can sign up to pre-order that wine and get all of these incredibly delicious Armenian wines that are featured in the movie at storicawines.com. Without further ado, Adrian Rodriguez of Joss Wines and Claire Copey talking about Georgia.
Hi everyone, I'm Claire Copey, and I am joined today by one of my dearest friends. Very excited to talk with him. His name is Adrian Rodriguez, and he's a sommelier, wine professional here in Los Angeles, and he recently started making wine. I don't know why you're doing that to yourself, but thanks for talking to us about it. How are you doing, Adrian?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Can't complain, you know?
Yeah, very excited to talk to you about all the wines we've been making. I mean, there's just so much interesting thing we've been doing the last couple of years.
Yeah, I can't wait to get talking about that because you're doing some crazy stuff. But first, I'd like to get a little into your background here. So as far as wine goes, how did the wine bug first bite you? And then how did it get you to Los Angeles and your career here?
Wow. That goes back to, that goes back to my family. I was born in Perpignan. I grew up in Toulouse. So if you drive from one town to another, most of what you're going to see is vines. I mean, it's not that special to be working in a wine business back home. It's a big part of the French economy. So I actually went to wine school right after high school. I was 19 when I joined in. It takes enology, and viticulture takes a scientific background, which I was a scientific major. So it takes a lot of chemistry and biology, like when you're going to get into it, really, pH, acids, like sugar transformation, bacteria, all of that. That's a fair amount of chemistry, biochemistry, and biology. So when I started studying it, it was like very about the science, and how wine goes. It's like science with a little bit of magic and a little bit of soul and a little bit of passion and some booze on top of that. So I became very passionate and really quick with it. All the other elements beside the hard cold facts about chemistry, it became something natural to like both sides of it, the scientific part of it and that kind of like soul magic feeling, that artistic part of it, really.
Absolutely.
So that was, I started with wine school, so like you're right into it. I worked in Languedoc, I worked in Fronton near Toulouse, I worked in Bordeaux. Then I went to London after that, just, to explore a big city, because I'm from a very 800 people village in south of France, a very small village.
Oh, really? Is that small? Damn, I didn't know that.
Super small. Yeah, where I grew up, Le Fogat, it's near Toulouse, is super small. There's a lot of small villages that's not uncommon back home. And then I worked as a sommelier. I found a job for Alain Ducasse, a pretty big chef. Fantastic cellars. I worked for him. Then I worked as a wine director for a TV chef named Bryn Williams. After that, I moved to Canada and worked writing articles and doing videos and social media for the Société des Alcools du Québec, which is responsible of selling all the booze in Quebec, basically. After that, I worked for Négociant back in France for international sales, for the website, for buying for a high-end, Burgundy and Bordeaux negociant. And after that, I found a job in Los Angeles. I wanted to come to the US. I think it's a very exciting market we have here in California, being a producer, having all the wines in the world, all kinds of restaurants, all kinds of foods, all kinds of pairings. Like there's no much as eclectic as Los Angeles you can find for wine and food.
I agree with that. Yeah. The way I met you is that you were selling me wine at restaurants. Well, I guess we met more like drinking at bars and stuff like that. But then we really started working together. I was buying wine from you for restaurants. So that's a whole other side of the industry as well.
It is a whole other side. And when you realize, I realized something, I realized this when I was much younger already. I was like, oh, the people that are selling the wine have more control over it maybe and making more money actually than the people selling it, when all the little, quirks that make into the price of a bottle of wine. A lot of it comes from, the people that are selling a wine well is harder also sometimes and often to make it well.
That's why I haven't gotten into that, because it would drive me insane and I'd lose my mind. So then you decided to create your own label of wine, which is Just Wines. JOS for anybody.
Yeah, just, yeah, it could be Just Wine, but Just Wines, yeah. My business partners are Georgian Thomas Gomiashvili. And we were, drinking.
How did you meet business partners in Georgia?
They have a restaurant here in LA called Le Grand Restaurant downtown LA. So that's how I met them. I met them like I met you, selling them wine, basically. Selling them wine and then drinking wine and discussing about, the wines that are in Georgia, all the very particular style of wine that they have in Georgia. Many SOMMs, even however, knowledgeable they can be, don't know much about the grapes, the regions, and the style of wine. People know Quevri. It's the, clay, the clay pots that in which they make the wines, that are generally buried. People know one or two grape, like Cats Italy, which is the main one, but there's really a lot of unknown more there is knowledge about this country.
Yeah, I don't think I really had any until I started learning from you.
Yeah, I mean, me neither until I met them. I knew a couple of facts, like it's the birthplace of wine, but really, besides that, there's a lot that people don't know. And and I want to explore and realize, there's a bunch of grapes and a bunch of different terroirs, different climates, vastly different climates. Even you think it's a small country because of the mountains, the influence of the Black Sea. So it's like can be really, really cold in some parts and really, really warm in some others. So you have a spectrum of energy, in the grapes that is pretty wide. And I felt that there was a very classic winemaking way of making the wine there, which is long macerations. And I personally believe that with long macerations, you kind of like taking away the terroir and grape identity a little bit to, for the winemaking technique that takes over in terms of aromatic spectrum.
And why is that? Why do long macerations take away the terroir, do you think?
It's like, I'll make an analogy of that. It's like if you're making like a braised piece of meat, in the end, it's going to have that braised kind of feeling. And it doesn't mean that it's not great. I love meat, some braised short rib, but you can make a steak that you can make medium rare, you can make tartare, you can make this, you can make that. There are so many other things you can make with the same ingredients. And I believed then it can show a different face, a different identity for those grapes and those terroirs. And that's what we've been trying to do.
So you met these guys who became your business partners for the wines. But how did you, I can understand the like curiosity and wanting to make wine. We all know how hard it is though. So then you decided to take it an extra level. And instead of like, Santa Barbara's in our backyard or like Paso or whatever, you're like, I'm going to go to the other side of the freaking world to make wines in Georgia. How did you, like, why did you do that to yourself?
Yeah, when I backtrack, I'm like, how did he end up being so fast like this? Because my first trip to Georgia, I just went there to see what's what. So my friend George tells me, I have this guy that can help. He's a friend of ours. He'll pick you up at the airport. He'll bring you to vineyards so you can see it for yourself. Because I kept sending a list of questions like feet per acre and like yields per acre and orientation and the space between the feet and blah, 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 pruning systems. And he's like, dude, you got to go there. I can't. Nobody can answer those questions through email. Go there and see it for yourself. And me going to check it, it's ended up me making a contract with the grape growers in a winery to make a couple of wines right away. So that week ended up being very productive. It's me visiting vineyard, me visiting grapes, and I thought I was just checking some things, and actually it turns out I was buying grapes already. I was like, oh, the guy, it's like, oh, we bought 4 tons of grapes.
You impulse bought grapes to make wine?
Impulse, like it's an impulse purchase, like by the counter. And I was back in the plan. I was like, dude, we're already like that's really cheap, that really fast. That how it was very easy to find grapes, because you have to understand, in Georgia there's a lot of people growing grapes, and there's a lot of big factories that are buying those grapes. So buying there's factories that are making 20 million bottles. So you can take a couple of tons, off of, like, they're all mine.
I can't imagine that those are very high quality wines that they're making.
No, they're not making fantastic wine. But what I'm saying is that you can easily get, this guy will buy 10 tons of grapes like this. Like, you don't even. That's not. And there's a few, producers that are making their own wine. They have their own vines. They have their own winery. But there's a lot of people buying grapes, and a lot of people just making grapes. Actually, a lot of vineyard owned, in Georgia. So meeting and finding one actually wasn't that hard. Finding the right quality that you want, that can be a lot harder. But the opportunity of making wine presented itself pretty quickly. As soon as I found people, we were meeting with winery. As soon as I found people that can be, oh yeah, I know what you mean. Like, I understand your way of making wine. I understand what you want to do with that, and I agree that I'm going to be helping you doing that. That was I already stepped in it. Like, we were already in it. We were already talking about winemaking process, sulfites leveled, call name it. So we were already in it. So honestly, my exploration trip came back and was like, all right, guys, we're making these 2 wines.
Your exploration trip turned into
you're
already making wines.
Yeah, it turned out to be 4 wines. And then the following year, I went there a bunch of times to find more grape growers, qualities that were requiring different grapes. And by the second year, we were making 60,000 bottles.
Which is absolutely insane. Like, people need to know, like, that's a lot. He's on his, this is your, this will be your 3rd vintage this year. In 20, No, you're going to skip 2023. Actually,
we're going to skip that
it's a
one.
crap year. You decided to make orange wines, natural wines, is like the base of the Just Wines lineup.
Mm-hmm.
And so what was that decision process to make natural orange wines?
I'm going to start with the natural part. The natural part was basically, we're looking for organic grapes. I don't need to add anything in the wines besides a little bit of sulfites for conservation. So they call natural wine. There's really not like a certification for natural wine. Some people call natural wine stuff they made with industrially made grapes with a ton of sulfites. It's a bit everything and nothing sometimes. But my personal opinion, my personal vision of that is, I'm not adding any additives because I want the wine to be as pure as possible, because I want the expression of the grape to speak. I want it to be like, very shiny, very jumping off the glass, very expressive, very explosive. And that's what I'm gravitating towards. I don't like wines that are too faulted. I'm not looking for something mousy or overly oxidized. I'm just very careful with the wine. I put minimal sulfite, and I'm very careful because I just wanted I want a grape, to speak through the glass.
Oh
basically.
Yeah, and your wines are clean. I have to say that. We did a conversation about natural wines with a gentleman who owns a wine investment company, Anthony Zhang, and we were talking about how so many of these natural wines, and a lot of orange wines too, are just super flawed because maybe these winemakers aren't, being technical or careful or clean enough. And I have to say, like, tasting through your wines, they're all so clean. Like, if you guys are looking for a really good example of a sound, in balance, clean, natural orange wine that still has all like the fun, fresh, funky, but it's not flawed funky. They're like really good, I have to say.
Thank you, Clara. Yeah, well, being careful. Yeah, you're right. It's just being careful. Like, it's like cooking. It's like being in a cellar is all about cleaning. Your cellar should be always like, you're cleaning it like it's a sushi kitchen. It needs to be super clean so everything tastes just fresh, just the way it's supposed to, and everything that is in your wine is something you did to it. It's something that you did on purpose. It's not something that just happened on its own.
Well, hopefully, right?
Hopefully, there's always a little bit of surprise. Oh, this goes that way. But even like I will say my funkiest wine, there's a tiny bit of VA on it. Everything that needs to be integrated inside the wine's profile and not something that dominates and creates the wine's profile. It's not a flaw that creates the wine profile. A little bit of VA here, a little, tiny bit of like bread here and there. And then you get it's part of the spectrum. It's part of the personality and the complexity of the wine. And that's when it becomes interesting.
And going back to the natural, sustainable aspect and the orange style as well, that's something that you had mentioned to me. This isn't a response to these wines becoming popular. This is also because this is a very traditional ancient style of winemaking in Georgia, correct?
It is. It's. They've always been using skin contact on the whites. They call them actually amber whites. They don't call them like white or orange. When you get a bottle of white in Georgia, you ask if it's amber or not. It means it's gonna be. They call it European style when you make an actual white direct press. And otherwise, it's called an amber wine. So the spectrum you can get, it's pretty wide. It can go from like generally from 3 to 6 months on the skins. Sometime with the whole clusters too. 6 months in the tank on the contact. So much so that your pomace in a Qvevri actually goes to the bottom. Do you know how when you're making wine, the pomace stays on top? After 6 months, it plunges down. It's actually like saturated in liquid.
Really?
And it plunges down. And that's how they know. That's how they pull the
and that's
juice
just naturally without any like punching down or anything like that. It just happens naturally.
They do a couple punch down at the beginning, but this happens more towards the end. Where your pomace plunge down, then it's easier for them, to take the juice off the top. Because you remember the Qvevris are in the ground, so you need to like, they're like vases that are like in the ground. So you just have an opening like this, and then you have like a big.
And that's something that's pretty unique to Georgia, right? To have these like in the ground.
Very unique to Georgia. It's been used like Grafner used those. Many people now have turned like to this technology because people like the contact with clay, especially on like tannic orange wines like this, that will kind of like soften a little bit the texture. Also, people used to use them because the ground is cooler and that naturally controls the temperature of fermentation. So that's how they did that. The problem is now you're harvesting in a much warmer climate than you did before because you're harvesting before. So if it's 105 degrees outside, the ground is cold, but it's not. It's a little bit cooler, but that doesn't make us. It doesn't make as much of a difference now as it did when they harvested in October. Like thousands of years ago.
So 2021 was your very first vintage, and you said you had 4 bottlings that first year, 4 different wines.
We ended up making a blend, so I wanted to make 2 wines. We found another grape, a very interesting grape called Pink Castelli, which is the gray Castelli Gris, really, which is very unfamous in the sense that it's co-planted. There's just a few acres on the planet. And I wanted to use it for a blend, but I liked it so much. I kept a little bit to bottle like 800 bottles by itself because it's very, very unique. I've seen 1, maybe 2 producers ever that have 100% of that grape. I still have a bottle at home. We'll have it. We're all. I was
gonna say you didn't bring it yesterday when we tasted through your wine.
We're out of stock. I kept a couple bottles. And the 22 vintage was so hot that on that pink grape, I got something more like a red wine. So I had to change the name. It's kind of a pink orange wine, and now it's the thing with pink grape is you can make any kind of wine. So now my orange wine from last year is a red wine. This current vintage.
That's winemaking, right? Like you got to just kind of roll with the punches.
Exactly.
So then 2022 comes around and you do have this hotter vintage and you expanded wildly. How many bottlings do you have now? Are you working with?
We have 12 different cuvées. That's what we created last year.
This guy's second vintage and he's got 12 different bottles. Like Jesus.
Yeah, we went a little bit overboard maybe sometime or so, but also
but you're experimenting.
There's a lot of those that are very small release and very small cuvée. There's really one wine that I make a ton of and a couple more that have 8,000 bottles. And then it's all 100Ks, 80Ks, 150Ks, some super small releases because I mean, it was a weird environment to discover those grapes because it was a very very hot vintage, but it gave me the opportunity to explain like what's gonna be what are those grapes are going to be when they're in full ripeness and everything. What is the extent of ripeness that they can offer, and I will translate into the wine. So I got to play. You tried yesterday some grapes by himself with different winemaking technique. I like Kissy. I like to play with that grape. Some blends. How do they interact with one another? And those are really things that I needed to do for myself because there's not so much people working in that way in Georgia. Therefore, I couldn't just buy a couple of bottles of this guy or this person or this girl and try them and be like, oh, that's how she does it or that's how he does it. No, it's just I needed to find out for myself what will be a medium to full light to full bodied spectrum of orange wine in Kakheti, Georgia, with those grapes. What is the spectrum? And now we found out. We know.
So with these, you're mentioning a lot of indigenous grapes, a lot of which I don't know, and I'm gonna have to do some more research on. But all of your wines are made from these ancestral Georgian grapes. Is that the vast majority of wines coming out of Georgia? Or are you seeing a lot of like Cabernet Sauvignon and Chardonnay planted there? You know.
No, that's a very vast majority of what's in Georgia. There is a couple of super big producer like those super factories, as I was mentioning, that have also some vineyards. So they have. I've heard of a little bit of Chardonnay. I've heard of a little bit of Riesling. I've heard of someone who does Sauvignon Blanc, but we're talking Syrah. I've seen Syrah in the hotter parts of Georgia because it's going to make a lovely, like big, ripe, like juicy red wine. The one I've seen the most weirdly is Montepulciano. I don't know how that happened. I've seen it in rosés. I've seen it in reds. They have some Muscat varietals also, like everyone else. Like every country in the world has a couple of different Muscat breed there. But besides that, no, it's I would say 99.9% of the plantings are indigenous Georgian grapes that can only be found in Georgia, except a couple of people planting it in Armenia or Bulgaria. But 99% of the Georgian grapes are in Georgia, and 99% of the grapes in Georgia are Georgian.
That's awesome. I love that they're fully just embracing their wine identity and rolling with it instead of kind of, playing to the more international market. But does that make it so not only are you making these wines by yourself, you're doing everything, like you're marketing it and everything, which has to be said, like what a huge job that is, because it's one thing to make a really excellent wine, but if if it's not getting into glasses, what's the point? So have you found, I think marketing it in general would just be difficult, but have you found because they're Georgian wines, because they're made with these grapes that a lot of people can't pronounce from a region they might not be able to pronounce, are you finding that difficult?
I will say that this is a double-sided coin, really, because they are unknown. My potential of transforming or creating the brand around it. It's like a lot of freedom, because there's no perception for those grapes yet. So I get to create it. So that gives me a lot of freedom in that sense. I like to look at that way. And I will say that orange wine is something that people don't really care about the grape really. It's more about the look. The way that the wine looks is very important, especially now. I'm using clear bottles. You've seen, the rainbow of colors that my wine creates. Fun labels. My baby brother did the labels for me, Gauthier. I'm very lucky. I use one of my labels as my friend Gabriel Mouze, who's a painter, who I bought one of his painting and used it for the label. My girlfriend made one for me. And we have one of our designer in Georgia that did one. But so my brother did a bunch of them really fast too. We just, I don't know how to say, like, we're just creating kind of the market with it. So sometimes it's a fantastic opportunity to be like, yeah, I got room for your wines because there's no one in that category. But the other side of it is like nobody's looking for Georgian wine. Some people don't even want to try them. They have that idea of like very severe, austere, tannic, oxidized, like very long maceration of Georgian wines. And some people are working with a couple of producers and that's the only thing they want to hear about. So I would say it's a little bit like everything. When you bring something new to the market, you're going to have to work. You're going to have to entice people to try it. You're going to have to knock on some doors and not give up.
I haven't seen a ton of Georgian wines like in the supermarket or anything like that. And you're talking about like all of these millions of bottles that a lot of these bigger producers are making. Why is it that, I mean, are they getting exported to the US or?
I mean, this has been, Georgia has been part of the Soviet Union until 1990, still having, difficulties breaking the ties with, the immensely powerful Russian influence there, especially now with the war in Ukraine. Georgia has two regions that are occupied by the Russian army as well. People don't talk about it as
Including
much.
the region that you're working in.
It's not the region I'm working, but I'm getting one of. No, thank God. Oh my God. No, not in Kakheti, which that will be really sad because that's one of the core region of the history of Georgia is embedded into the region of Kakheti. It's like the Bordeaux of Georgia. It's like the biggest wine production. Historically, probably wine was probably created in that particular region 8,000 years ago. This is what I found, the oldest residue of winemaking in Kakheti.
Where in the country is Kakheti?
That is on the eastern side. So that's that you're gonna have Russia on the east and Azerbaijan on the south of the region of Kakheti. So that's really at the eastern. That's a really really warm part of Georgia because it's between two chain of mountain. It's a valley called the Alazani Valley, which is the river. The Alazani River creates that valley. And when you look at the map, it's like it makes like a little slide like this between the mountain, and that's very nice and flat valley, so you can grow all kinds of things, very agricultural. And it's very hot, so it bakes, like it makes the grapes like really ripe. Because when you go to mountain, the temperature cools down really really fast. It goes voila. So that's where we're based there in Georgia.
Does Georgia, are the wine regions designated like they are in countries that, wine drinkers are a little more familiar with, France? Is there an appellation system in place in Georgia as of yet?
Well, there kind of is. There is. I'm not dealing with it much. There is. You can put the name of the region, but I don't think there's a lot of like rules that are being implied, that are being controlled. And by an entity. I know there's some micro zones. Like there is one called Mukuzani, for example, which is not too far from where I am. Some micro zones. This is civilly controlled to be able to put Mukuzani on your bottle. But I've said my wines are from Kakheti on the bottle. It's not that controlled in terms of like yields, in terms of all the rules I can compare to a French appellation from my personal background. So I will say it's pretty easy on that side. That being said, I'm having trouble with there's an entity that certifies the wine in Georgia for export, and it's very very dark for me to understand how they work because they will approve some wines and I'm like, well, and they refuse some wine for absolutely no reason. But it's not too much of an issue for me personally. It's just a little something more, a little something you have to jump over a little bit.
That's why it helps to have 12 different bottlings because you're going to get most of them approved. So
yeah, exactly.
you'll still have plenty of wine.
Yeah, if there's an issue with one, I'll blend with something else and we'll figure it out.
How has it been just transitioning? I mean, you're still working in restaurants a little bit and selling wine to restaurants, but what's been the best part of transitioning to winemaking for you?
The real fun part. I mean, besides winemaking itself, which is like if you like cooking and you like winemaking, it's like you wake up in the middle of the night having an idea for a blend or having an idea for something or a name of a wine or just a new technique I'm thinking of. For example, we tried yesterday a white that is 90% juice, 10% skin. So that's kind of finding all those little levels between the one. Being creative is one of a very exciting part of it. And honestly, talking about it, doing wine dinners, having people enjoying something you've created, enjoying with food in restaurant that you love. This is very rewarding, I will say. Having people that I didn't think will go for Georgian wine or didn't think will go for natural wine, of all kinds of age, of all kinds, of wine drinking habits coming towards my wine. That's really enchanting to see something like that.
And then on the other side of that coin, what's been the biggest challenge? Maybe something that surprised you that you weren't expecting?
Administration and logistics, it's always a lot more than you think it will be. Whatever you do in this world, the laws with alcohol in this country are very, very, very complicated. because there's 50 states. There's like shipping samples to New York has been enormously difficult. Seems like it would be something easy to. It's harder to ship samples to New York than to go to Georgia and make wine. So this is what they call compliance laws, like all the paperwork, all of that. That's been a big roadblock in so many ways. That is why also we skip that vintage, because just getting the wine there, all the little things that you don't think when you think I'm going to build this company, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. The hard part is making the wine, is selling the wine, convincing people to drink Georgian wines. But in the end, you realize that administration, cash flow, all that, those little details that make it really happen, that this has been the most frustrating part of it.
But you've done such a great job just hustling and marketing your wine and getting it into restaurants and not just in California. Like I expected, it'd be mostly Southern California, but where are your wines at right now?
We're working already in Oregon, and we have shipped a couple pallets already there. In a bunch of restaurants there, people can see while the wines are being sold around the country on our website, Just Wines. But yeah, I have Oregon. I just came back from New York. I did a big event there, so we're hoping, to soon have representation there. I have some friends in Canada. Probably for next year, we're gonna ship some cases there directly from Georgia. So far that's it. We have a couple states here. We're hoping to have 4 or 5 by the beginning of next year, and and growing, slowly growing. A lot of demand. I've been surprised of people asking samples in all kinds of states, like Rhode Island and stuff, like things you wouldn't
Really
expect. Asking, yeah.
That's so cool. I mean, it's not surprising to me because the wines, again, they are clean, they are sound, they're beautiful, they're nuanced. Like, especially, I love those bottles behind me. They're a lot of fun, and they're very food friendly too. Your wines are very food friendly, so it makes sense to me that a lot of restaurants are picking it up.
I was thinking, yeah, food friendly. It's because something I didn't mention: the food in Georgia. That's a big part of the culture, is the hospitality, the food. You go to a meeting to see a grape grower, and you think you're gonna go see the vineyard and talk about the grape, but you go to his house, you start putting out food. They put vine wood on the floor, like in outside, and just build a fire, put some meat on it, called mitzvah. It's like skewers that they serve with sour plum sauce. That happens every time you go somewhere. You shake a hand. By the time you turn around, somebody is cooking something. They bringing that farm cheese called surguni, bread. They bring carafes, because the wine doesn't come in bottle. They have the quiver in the back of the garage, and they just like fill it up. They bring like
That's
small
awesome.
like rock glasses, and just like everybody drinks shots of wines. So and you're eating like right away. So the food in Georgia, they have incredibly good produce. The meat is really good. Tomatoes are incredible. Vegetables in general, yeah. The bread is really good. So sorry, I just was just jumping on that. Yet yes, because some tannic wines like this, they go really well with food, because the tannins can get all the fat, all the energy, all the richness of the sauce, and you're just left with those beautiful, very deep aromatics. So I'm not surprised that they work well in restaurant, because those wines in general, whether they're very extracted on the lighter side like mine, they're wine that work really well with food. And the tapestry of food profiles we have in Los Angeles, going from like Asian, Thai, a lot of Mexican, a lot of South American, Central American cuisine, a lot of sweet and sour, a lot of sweet and spicy kind of foods. And that's why orange wine works so well with it, is because I think that people love spicy, they love wine pairings, and orange wine has that energy that you can find in a red with the freshness you can find in a white, which works with so many food profiles we have here in Southern California.
Oh yeah, and your lineup is just this huge range. So there are some that do drink really nicely on their own. I think honestly they all drink nicely on their own, but yeah, some of them are like with food, lovely. I'm just so amazingly proud of everything you've done, and to just see this growing. It's very well deserved. Everybody, keep your eyes peeled for Just Wines and Georgia wines in general too. But these wines in particular are pretty awesome, pretty incredible. I think you're going to love them. So go to justwines.com to see where in the world Adrian is selling them right now, where you can find them, where you can buy them and drink them. And then where can we find Just Wines on social media so we can follow you?
Instagram. On Instagram, we have it. We have Just Wines on Instagram. You're gonna see the logo is a double J orange, so you cannot really miss it. There's a bunch of videos of me when I was in Georgia, pictures of the grapes, a video of me making the wine, going there to check the wine several times a year. You can see me in the cold and me in the heat. There's a lot of fun stuff and more stuff and events coming up.
And I meant to ask, what does Jos mean?
Oh, Jos, actually, when Georgian cheers, they say Gaumar Jos, which means actually Gaumar Jos, which means victory to you. But that's outside, they say cheers and say Jos, 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 and you just drink your wine. So that's kind of like cheers.
Well, that's perfect.
Awesome. There you go, yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing your beautiful wines with us, Adrian. And
thank you for me.
Yeah, everybody look for Just Wines and hey, Jos.
Hey, Jos, thank you. Thanks so much.
I want to thank everybody for listening. It really means a lot. If you enjoyed this podcast, please give us a great rating wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thank you, Claire Copey, and thank you, Adrian Rodriguez, for the insightful conversation on Georgian wines. Do not forget, go to sommfilms.com to get tickets for Cup of Salvation. Coming in Chicago next weekend, Napa the following weekend, and playing all week in Los Angeles at the Lemley Glendale. More screenings are being added all the time at sommfilms.com. Thank you to John Adams for producing this episode. And if you want to get the wines in the film, in Cup of Salvation, go to storicawines.com, STORICA, storicawines.com. Everybody be safe and drink a glass of very ancient wine for me. We'll talk soon.